This is Shanghai's inner city.
Today, Shanghai city centre looks rather different. Spaces where once lied, close-knit laneway neighbourhoods home to hundreds of families and migrants have now transformed to glass tower skylines. But, tucked away in the pockets of Shanghai's inner-city boulevards, many neighbourhoods known as Lilongs remain, humming with authentic Chinese life. The essence of these old lanes has remained remarkably preserved in a city that has developed at breakneck speed. Lilongs are unique to Shanghai and a reflection of the city's rich history and development. Shanghai's history and urban development expert Patrick Cranley says Shikumen is a term referring to the earliest laneway neighbourhoods built in the mid-18th century.
There was a civil war that many people fled the areas of fighting in the interior, and they came to Shanghai. And developers, essentially what we would know as developers today, mostly foreigners, purchased property and put up these lane neighborhoods. And they built them in a very specific style with security as the paramount. And that's why typical Shanghai-style lane neighborhood, or Lilong, is a city block or a portion thereof, with just a few entrances that can be locked off by gates in times of trouble. And within those entrances, there's a matrix of lanes inside, with all the houses sharing walls.
Cranley says after the rebellion, developers continued to build in the same style, as it was not only an economical way to house the influx of migrants, but they discovered people actually enjoyed living in close quarters.
Private life is public. In the hot, humid summer, the street becomes the living room. If there is friction between neighbors or between the people and the government, we did not find it here.
But more than 2/3 of the city's Shikumen housing has since been demolished. China's growing economic prosperity in the recent decades has generated a surge in urban development. Demolition is currently in full progress in the area of East Lausimen. To younger locals, it's the name of a train stop connecting Line 8 and 10. However, according to the Fudan University history professor Sun Jian, Lausimen is one of the oldest parts of Shanghai.
When we hear the name Lausimen, we always think about the past of Shanghai. And because of this word Lao, old.
Cranley, who's also the director of the historic Shanghai tour group, says most of Lausimen's Lilongs have already been redeveloped.
The portion that's north of Fuxing Road is slated for redevelopment. So the neighborhood is dying from the west to the east.
This is one of Lausimen's few remaining Lilong communities. The residents say the government hasn't yet set plans for demolishment of this area. Instead, some of the buildings are being repaired and a new piping system is being fitted. But weighed down by decaying infrastructure and overcrowding, many residents are eager to move to newer, more spacious residential homes.
Is this their home?
Ting Xiang lives in a single room with his wife and sister. Their kitchen was demolished a few days ago, so now they sleep, cook, and eat here, sharing this as their toilet and bathroom. This man says he's a former government official and did not want to reveal his name. The 71-year-old says he's lived here his whole life.
They don't keep it in the dark, we have no idea what's going on. The government says it could happen overnight, they could come and say, okay, that's, tomorrow moving out. They don't.
What happens to the residents when the government does decide to demolish their houses depends largely on where they own their homes. Mark Liu grew up in one of Lausimen's Lilongs. His parents own their home, but he says they're unlucky because the government does not want to move them.
For example, you have a house in Lausimen about 40 square meters. So maybe if you want to get money, you can get 8 million, 9 million, maybe more.
There's a whole another category, people who live in Lilong neighborhoods who are migrants from other parts of the country and do not necessarily have the legal permit to reside in Shanghai. And they're not given any compensation, so they have to find another place similarly inexpensive to live. People's economic situations change radically. In some cases, very much for the better. In other cases, they just have to move out.
Despite the poor living conditions, many older residents, accustomed to the intimacy and familiar lanes of their neighborhoods, have a more difficult time leaving Lilong life behind.
In one of these neighborhoods, everybody knows everybody else, for better or for worse. And when those people move out to the suburbs and move to a high-rise, they'll be lucky if they know the people across the hall from them.
So during now, Shima said there's a lot of really good memories, and it's a neighborhood is mixed together. We're talking with each other. We know everyone. But now, for me, I live in a new house. Way back home, we close my door. We never know each other.
Professor Sun says the government is beginning to prioritize the preservation of old Shanghai and the intangible heritage culture that lies within these lanes.
At the very beginning, when Shanghai is first opened to the outside world, the government does not have a very clear idea of how to plan the city. And certainly they did a lot of stupid things, right? But I think they have a plan now to restore all those old buildings.
The progress of the city's Shukuman Alley renovations is on display at the Shanghai Urban Planning Exhibition Center. This process, however, is a lot more lengthy and costly than demolishing and starting over.
It made sense for them to think about demolishing some of these old neighborhoods. The way that occurred did not factor in what would these neighborhoods be like as an attraction for tourism. You get to feel that energy and that neighborly warmness that is a part of the Lane neighborhood culture. They are places that Shanghai people identify with. If you take them away, they won't be a part of the fabric of the city. But that's not to argue that the city shouldn't change. It has to change.
The central location of these neighborhoods means the land will continue rising in cost and demand. And the soul of these streets will be the ultimate price.
Some measures of how many Lane neighborhoods there were and how many there are today would indicate that somewhere between 10 and 20% are still standing. The chances for any of those to survive are low.